a new adventure from the author of the Purple Heart Stories channel, for you, friends, and support with a like and subscription if you enjoy it. Chapter 1: Shocking News. You know what's worse than finding out about the death of your own twin brother? Finding out he left you a posthumous video message asking you to go to work at a corporation in his place until anyone finds out he's gone. And what's worse than that? Discovering that your wife suddenly addresses you, under the mask of your brother, as an old lover, and even plans something irreparable for you. My name is James Hart, and just a week ago I was an ordinary Navy SEAL, now a security consultant with a marriage cracking at the seams. Now I'm a walking dead man, temporarily pretending to be the CFO of a corporation that deals in contract killings. That's the kind of person my brother turned out to be. Someone would say that in this situation you should run as far as you can. But if your brother, whom you considered a traitor, sacrificed himself to save you, you're simply obliged to finish what he started, even if it kills you. Maybe it will. Friday began like thousands of other days. I woke up, as always, at 5:30, half an hour before the alarm went off. Many of us former military can't shake this habit. Even on the cloudiest mornings, even after sleepless nights, our eyes open on their own, as if there's an invisible timer built into our heads. Caitlin was asleep, turned to the wall. Her shoulder was rising and falling slightly in time with her breathing. Once I loved watching her sleep. There's something inexpressibly intimate about seeing a person at that moment. Now it was just a habitual observation. Lately, she and I seemed to exist in parallel worlds that only occasionally intersected at dinner or in bed. I quietly got up, trying not to wake her, although I knew that even a grenade explosion wouldn't make Caitlin open her eyes before her own alarm went off. I pulled on sweatpants and a t-shirt, slipped my feet into running shoes, and slipped out the door. A morning run is as much a part of my existence as breathing or a heartbeat. 5 miles through the suburbs of Boston, then another 2 if the weather permits. That morning a light rain was falling and the streets were completely empty. I ran steadily, habitually counting steps and controlling my breathing. 1, 2, 3, 4, inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4, exhale. In my head, a void that I had cultivated for years. No thoughts, no plans, just rhythm, just movement. At such moments, I was sometimes overcome by a feeling of complete loneliness, not heavy, not oppressive, but somehow primal, so to speak, as if I were the last person on Earth, or the first, or maybe not a person at all, but some kind of energy clot that had been accidentally given shape. When I returned, Caitlin was already gone. Lately, she often left without waiting for me, leaving the house empty and echoing like an abandoned warehouse. Before, she at least left notes: "I'm at Mom's. I'll be late at the office. Meeting with Jenny." Then the notes turned into short messages on the phone, and now they had disappeared. I took a shower and while drying off, looked at my reflection in the fogged mirror. The eyes that Caitlin once called blue as a stormy ocean looked tired. Wrinkles had settled around them that didn't seem to be there yesterday. Graying stubble, I would have to shave it off before going to see the client. My shoulders and arms remained the same as in the Marines, firm, reliable, ready for action. But for what action? To defend what? Whom? After getting dressed, I went down to the kitchen and habitually turned on the coffee maker. The sound of it working in the empty house seemed somehow inappropriately loud. Caitlin loved those sophisticated cappuccinos and lattes with foam, while I preferred black coffee without sugar, simple and honest, like a shot. Once we joked about this as the most striking symbol of our differences. Now I didn't even remember the last time she and I talked about anything other than bills and weekend plans. While checking my email over breakfast, I saw 2 new consultation offers. A bank in the suburbs wanting to modernize its security system, and some kind of tech company worried about industrial espionage. Routine requests, nothing special. Honest work for honest money. I helped people protect themselves from invisible threats, which wasn't so different from what I did in the military. I called the bank representative and arranged a meeting for next week. Then I stared for a long time out the window at the empty garden that Kaitlyn and I hadn't managed to put in order this summer. The smooth surface of my life occasionally rippled, but on the whole remained predictable, as it should be for the life of a person who professionally assesses and minimizes risks. Everything was fine, except for Kaitlyn. But I was used to not thinking about it, used to not noticing how she and I were slowly drifting in different directions. Military training, focus on what you can influence, ignore what's beyond your control. And I diligently pretended not to feel the emptiness in the house becoming more and more tangible, like another, invisible inhabitant. At 1:30, the phone rang, an unfamiliar number from some kind of prepaid phone. I usually don't answer such calls, but this time I picked up the phone for some reason. Maybe something inside already felt it. This call would change everything. "James Hart," I said briefly. There was a pause on the line, then a female voice said, "James, this is Samantha Warren." That was unexpected. Samantha Sam Warren, my former colleague. We hadn't talked in probably 2 years and hadn't seen each other even longer than that. But I recognized her voice instantly, and it triggered a wave of memories: the desert, the taste of sand on my teeth, quiet laughter in the dark before an operation, her invariable "I've got it covered" heart. My first thought was that she was calling to invite me to some kind of veterans meeting, but there was something in her voice that instantly made the skin on the back of my neck crawl. The same feeling that told me in Fallujah not to go down the main street, but to turn into an alley. "Sam," I breathed, "long time no see, what's hap?" "James, your brother just died," she cut me off, and the world suddenly froze. I stood in the middle of the kitchen with the phone pressed to my ear and felt the blood drain from my face. Michael dead. My brother, my twin, dead. We hadn't spoken for 3 years since he pulled that stunt at my wedding, but the thought that he was no more. "What?" was all I could manage to say. "What happened?" "No one knows about it yet except me and the local morgue in a remote town, where my classmate who runs it called me from. According to the official version, an accident in the mountains." Sam's voice sounded strained, as if she were speaking from a prepared text. "But something's not right here, because along with your brother, a second person fell into the abyss, who looks more like a hired killer from his tattoos and physical training, but his identity hasn't been established. And I doubt it ever will be." I sat right down on the floor, leaning against the refrigerator. Thoughts were racing like balls in a lottery machine. A hired killer, in the car with my brother. What the heck, Sam? This is some kind of nonsense. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to understand what was happening. Michael is a financier, he's a director at some company. What the? "Archer Investments," Sam prompted. "Chief Financial Officer." "Yeah, whatever," I brushed it off. How are you even involved in this, and where did you?" "Your brother asked me a long time ago that if something happened to him, to pass something on to you as quickly as possible." Sam's voice became quieter. "James, I need to meet with you. This isn't a phone conversation." I rubbed my face with my hand, feeling the dry skin of my palm scratch my stubble. "Sam, this is..." All the words seemed inappropriate, insufficient. "Michael is dead, my brother is dead." "Okay, when and where?" "The Parkview Motel on the outskirts of Portland. Tomorrow at 2 in the afternoon. Room 37. Come alone and make sure you're not being followed." "Followed?" I laughed humorlessly. "Good heavens, Sam, you've been reading too many spy novels. Who needs me?" "Listen to me carefully, James." Her voice became stern, as it used to be when she was briefing newcomers before a mission. "If I'm right, then your brother's life wasn't cut short by accident. And yours might be next. Be careful. Don't tell anyone where you're going, not even your wife." She hung up before I could ask even one more question. I sat on the kitchen floor with the phone in my hand and tried to piece the shattered reality back into some kind of coherent picture. My brother is dead, possibly murdered, and somehow this might be connected to me. I would have sat there until evening, but the work phone rang. Automatically answering it, I watched myself as if from the sidelines as I conducted a calm, professional conversation about video surveillance systems, as I wrote down details in a notebook, as I agreed on a price, as if nothing had happened, as if the world hadn't been turned upside down. Kaitlyn returned around 7 when it was already dark outside. I heard her car door slam, the lock on the front door click. The sounds of her return, which once filled me with joy, now evoked only a strange anxiety. She came into the kitchen where I sat staring mindlessly at the laptop. Her hair was wet from the rain, her face a mask of polite fatigue. "Hi," she said, hanging her coat on the back of a chair. "How was your day?" I wanted to say, "My brother is dead," but instead I heard my own voice. "Normal. An old acquaintance from the army called, needs my help with a case. I'll have to go away for a week or two." This decision matured from somewhere deep inside, aside from conscious thought. Instinct. As Sam said, don't tell anyone, not even your wife, especially your wife. It was strange how quickly suspicion found soil in thinning trust. Kaitlyn froze for a moment, then nodded, and it seemed to me that in her eyes there was a flicker of relief. But no, probably just a trick of the light. "A business trip?" she asked, taking a bottle of white wine from the refrigerator. "Something like that," I replied evasively. "Some kind of security problems at an old base, they're asking for advice. Nothing special." "And when are you leaving?" She poured herself some wine, didn't offer me any. She knew I didn't drink on weekdays. "Tomorrow morning." Kaitlyn took a sip, looking at me over the rim of her glass. "So soon, and for how long?" "2 weeks, maybe a little longer." She nodded, as if this was the most ordinary news. "I see. I'll be busy too. We have a quarterly report. The whole department is standing on its ears." I watched her, trying to understand what was hidden behind her words. Kaitlyn worked as a financial analyst at some investment firm. I never really delved into the details. She used to talk about her work, about her projects, and although I understood little in all these financial schemes, I liked listening to her enthusiastic voice. When did she stop sharing? When did we stop really talking? "By the way, I was late today because of this report," she added, turning to the refrigerator. "Have you had dinner?" "I had a snack," I lied. In reality, I couldn't think about food all day. Michael is dead. My brother is dead. This thought beat inside like a trapped bird, but I couldn't say those words aloud. Couldn't tell Kaitlyn. Not because Sam warned me, but because it would make everything real. Final. We had dinner in almost complete silence. Kaitlyn told me something about her colleague Marcy, who was pregnant with her second child, and about a new sushi restaurant that her friend had invited her to. I pretended to listen, but my thoughts were far away. In fact, I was thinking about Michael and me. About how we grew up identical in appearance but so different inside. How we unsuccessfully tried to escape the imposed comparison but still constantly defined ourselves through each other. Michael and James, James and Michael, like two sides of the same coin. Laughing, sociable Michael, always the center of attention, and I, his silent shadow, an observer. Finding myself in the army in a clear hierarchy and understandable rules. When we quarreled at my wedding, it was like severing a part of myself. I hated him for those words, said in a drunken stupor, but now, learning of his death, I felt only a dull, senseless longing. What if I had dialed his number a year ago, a month ago, a week? At night I lay awake, listening to the measured breathing of Kaitlyn, who had turned to the wall, as usual lately. We used to fall asleep in each other's arms, but now there seemed to be an invisible boundary between us. And I thought about how I would leave in the morning and maybe never return to this bed, to this house, to this woman who had become a stranger. I woke up before dawn, packed my bag, left Kaitlyn a note, although I saw that she wasn't asleep, just pretending. "I'll call when I can," I said, standing in the bedroom doorway. She sat up in bed, her hair disheveled, her eyes still sleepy. "Good luck," she said quietly. I came over, leaned down to kiss her goodbye, and her lips touched mine, dry, warm, but somehow indifferent. As if it wasn't a kiss, but a kind of ritual, a necessary action when parting. I looked at her, beautiful, aloof, and thought, did I even know this woman? And had she ever known me? The Parkview Motel turned out to be exactly as I imagined it. A dilapidated two-story building on the outskirts of town, with a faded sign and an empty parking lot. Such places were built in the 70s, when traveling by car was new, and since then they had hardly changed, except that they had deteriorated and acquired a special smell of old carpets and hopelessness. I stopped my SUV at the far end of the parking lot from where the entire motel was visible. A habit developed over years of training, always keep an overview, always have a way to retreat. I sat in the car for about 10 minutes, studying the surroundings. Sparse guests, mostly truckers, judging by the trucks in the parking lot. The owner behind the counter, a fat man in a t-shirt, staring at the TV. Nothing suspicious. Room 37 was on the second floor at the far end. I went up the creaky stairs, feeling my muscles tense. My body was ready for danger, even if my mind told me there was none. I knocked 3 times, as agreed. The door opened almost instantly, and I saw Samantha Warren. She had changed over the years, her hair shorter, the wrinkles around her eyes deeper, her gaze sterner. But her smile remained the same, crooked, slightly ironic. "Hart," she nodded, stepping back to let me in. "Warren," I replied, stepping inside and instinctively assessing the room. The room was typical for such a motel, a bed that had seen better days, a nightstand with a lamp, a small rickety table and 2 chairs. But a map of the region with some notes on it hung on the wall, and next to it, photos and newspaper clippings. On the table, a laptop, around it, stacks of papers. Sam had always been a meticulous analyst. "Glad to see you, although the circumstances," she hesitated, then just waved her hand. "Sit down." I lowered myself into the chair, which predictably creaked under my weight. Sam sat opposite, rubbed her eyes, judging by the dark circles under them. She hadn't slept for a couple of days. "Tell me," I said simply. She nodded, as if making up her mind, then began. "Michael contacted me 3 months ago, called from a prepaid phone like I called you, was frightened, spoke in riddles, said he was in big trouble and that if something happened to him, I should pass something on to you. You were in contact," I was surprised, "these last few years." Sam nodded. "He found me about a year ago, said he wanted to get news about you sometimes. Not directly, you weren't talking after all, but at least to know that you were okay." Something squeezed in my chest. So Michael was still thinking about me, although we were both too stubborn to take the first step toward reconciliation. "And what happened? How did he?" The words stuck in my throat. Sam reached for the laptop, opened a folder with photos. The official version, an accident. Michael was traveling through the mountains in the northern part of the state, lost control on a winding road. His SUV fell off a cliff about 60 meters high. The body was found yesterday morning. She turned the screen to me, and I saw photos from the scene, a twisted SUV at the bottom of the gorge, a body covered with a tarp, police officers examining the wreckage. I felt nauseous, but forced myself to look. "And the second body, you said something about a hired killer." Sam nodded. "That's where it gets strange. A second man was found in the car whom they couldn't identify. He had no documents, but he had special tattoos." She opened another photo. "My contact in the police took these pictures, see." In the photo was a man's wrist with a tattoo, a strange symbol that I couldn't make out. "This is the mark of a certain group of mercenaries, mostly from Eastern Europe," Sam explained. "I recognized it because we ran into them in Afghanistan. Remember Operation Silk Road?" I nodded. "That nightmare in the mountains near Kandahar when we lost 3 men. They're hired for the dirtiest jobs," Sam continued. "Murders, kidnappings, intimidation. What I don't understand is why he was in the car with Michael. If he was hired to kill your brother, why ride together? Unless Michael knew he was being hunted, I said slowly, and took the killer with him, deliberately. Sam nodded. I thought so too, and that coincides with what he told me the last time. If things go wrong, at least I'll buy time for James. I felt my throat constrict from a sudden wave of emotion. My brother sacrificed himself to protect me. From what? Sam, what the heck is going on? She sighed. I think it's better if you hear it from Michael himself. Sam took a small envelope made of thick paper from her jacket pocket. It was inscribed, "To my brother, in the event of my death." I recognized the handwriting immediately, slightly careless, with a characteristic slant of the letters to the left. The same as mine, only I had trained for years to write more evenly, and Michael always wrote the way he was comfortable. Inside was a flash drive, ordinary black, without identifying marks. He gave me this at our last meeting, Sam explained. Said that if something happened to him, I should show you what was recorded there, and no one else. I turned the flash drive over in my hands, feeling a chill run down my spine. A last message from my brother. The last words he wanted me to hear. Sam plugged the flash drive into her laptop and opened the only file, a video recording. Michael was sitting at a table behind him, a window overlooking the night city. My brother looked haggard with dark circles under his eyes as if he hadn't slept for days. His hair was tousled, his shirt rumpled, and his eyes tired, wary, with some kind of feverish gleam. I looked at him, my mirror image, and I couldn't believe he was gone. That I would never hear his laughter again, never receive an annoyingly smug message about his new deal or another victory. Michael took a deep breath and began to speak. James, if you're watching this, then I'm no longer alive. Sooner or later, it was bound to happen, because I got caught up in some very dirty business. His voice sounded hoarse, cracked. He ran a hand over his face, such a familiar gesture that my heart squeezed. I'm sorry, brother, but you wouldn't have been able to help me. I discovered that my company is involved in a series of corporate murders. They eliminate competitors with the help of undetectable poisons. My boss, Viktor Zarov, is the mastermind. I've collected the evidence, but if you're watching this, that means I've been exposed. I stared at the screen, not believing my ears. Corporate murders, poisons. My brother, always so cautious, so calculating, involved in murders. I'll say one thing, I'll try to take the killer with me, so he can't tell the customers that I'm dead, and give you time to strike back. So I was right. Michael deliberately took the killer with him into the abyss. Knowing that he had been exposed, he decided not to give up without a fight. I have a plan. While they think I'm still alive, you have to replace me at the investment conference in a week. As if I'm perfectly fine. All the key figures will be there. Circumstantial evidence has already been sent to the FBI, but they need specific confessions, otherwise the case will fall apart before it even starts. I looked at Sam in astonishment, who was watching my reaction intently. Is he serious? He wants me to pretend to be him, in a company that deals in murders. Sam gestured to the screen. Listen to the end. Michael on the recording looked more and more agitated. I'm sorry for dragging you into this. And yes, there will be something else that won't please you. Forgive me in advance for it, if you can. You'll find out later. His eyes were momentarily filled with something resembling shame. But before I could understand what it meant, he continued. Time is short. In my apartment, in the safe behind the Hopper painting in the study, you'll find all the necessary documents. The code is our date of birth. James. I know there have been all sorts of things between us, but you're the only one I can trust. The only one who can finish what I started. He fell silent as if gathering his thoughts, then added quietly. If I don't survive, I want you to know I was always proud that you were my brother, even when we weren't talking. Forgive me for everything. The recording broke off and the screen went blank. Sam and I sat in silence, broken only by the hum of the air conditioner. "What the heck?" I finally breathed, leaning back in my chair. "What the heck is going on?" Sam poured me some water from a bottle on the nightstand. "I've checked what I could," she said after a pause. "Archer Investments is a large investment company that has been showing incredible profits for the last 5 years. Viktor Zarov, its founder and CEO, is known as a ruthless businessman. An immigrant from Eastern Europe made himself from scratch, a classic American success story." I shook my head. "And what about the murders? This sounds like nonsense." "I'm not sure," Sam said cautiously. "But there have been several strange deaths in companies competing with Archer's clients in the last 3 years. The CEO of a pharmaceutical company died of a heart attack right before a public announcement about a new drug. The head of a tech startup died of a stroke on the eve of a major deal. All relatively young, healthy people. And interestingly, after each such death, the company's shares fell, and then one of the firms associated with Archer bought them up." I was silent, trying to make sense of what I had heard. My brother worked for a company that killed people for profit, and now he wanted me to infiltrate it under his name. "This is madness," I finally said. "Even if everything he said is true, I can't just take and pretend to be him. We may be twins, but I don't know anything about finance. I don't even know how he behaves at work, how he talks to colleagues." "I can help with that," Sam said. "During this time, I've managed to get to know your brother pretty well. But yes, the plan is risky, very risky." She fell silent, looking out the window where the rain was starting. The drops drummed on the glass, creating a strange, soothing rhythm. "You don't have to do this," she finally said. "We can go to the police, tell them everything we know." "And what will we tell them?" I smiled humorlessly. "Hello, my twin brother died, and before he died he recorded a video where he says that his company is killing people with untraceable poisons. They'll think we're crazy." "You're right," Sam sighed. "Without evidence it sounds like nonsense. We need what Michael collected." I got up and went to the window. The rain intensified, blurring the outlines of the parking lot and the flashing sign of the motel. My face was reflected in the glass, Michael's face, but with a different expression. More stern, more wary. "If Michael was telling the truth, and his company really is involved in murders, then they won't stop," I said slowly. "There will be new victims." "Probably," Sam agreed. "And if he's right about the FBI, then they're waiting for irrefutable proof. Confessions." "Yes." I took a deep breath. Thoughts were confused, emotions were raging, but through this chaos, one clear line broke through. My brother died trying to stop something terrible, and I'm the only one who can finish what he started. "Okay," I finally said, turning to Sam. "I'll do it. I'll go to New York, break into Michael's apartment, find the evidence, and if everything matches what he said." "Then you'll replace him at the conference," Sam finished. "Yes, but I'll need your help, and—" I hesitated. "We need to check if Michael really contacted the FBI. If not, we'll just walk into a trap without insurance." Sam nodded. "I have contacts, I'll check, and I'll be in touch the whole time you're inside." We talked until late at night, discussing the details. Sam told me everything she knew about Michael and his work, and I tried to remember every detail that could help in this crazy masquerade. Before going to bed, I took an old, tattered photograph from my wallet, Michael and I at graduation. Young, smiling, full of hope. His hand on my shoulder, my elbow resting in his side, a silly pose that Mom insisted on. "Show that you're brothers," she said then. And we showed, awkwardly but sincerely. "I'll finish what you started," I whispered, looking at my brother's smiling face. "I promise." Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled as if the sky was responding to my words. A storm was beginning, and I felt that it would engulf me completely. Chapter 2: Horrifying Discoveries. New York looked like an alien planet after the quiet suburbs of Boston. The noise, the light, the crowds of people, always rushing somewhere. All these attributes of the metropolis put pressure on me, forcing me to stay tense, as on a mission in unfamiliar territory. I parked the rented sedan 2 blocks from Michael's house and sat for a while, watching the entrance. The building was exactly as I imagined it, glass and steel, soaring into the sky, with a view of the Hudson and trimmed bushes at the entrance. A place where the cost per square meter equaled my annual salary. A golden cage in which my brother spent the last years of his life. I got out of the car and slowly walked toward the building, feeling Michael's apartment keys weighing down my pocket. Sam had somehow gotten them for me. I didn't ask how, and she didn't specify. Some things are best left in the shadows. A concierge was on duty at the entrance, an elderly man with a perfectly shaved face and in a uniform cap. He glanced at me without much interest, then suddenly straightened up and broke into a smile. "Mr. Hart, and I thought you had left for the weekend. How was the trip?" I froze for a moment but then relaxed. Of course, he mistook me for Michael. My brother and I were twins, and although the years had given us some differences, my shoulders were broader because of constant training. Michael had wrinkles around his eyes from frequent smiles, but to the casual observer, we remained indistinguishable. "I had to come back earlier," I replied, trying to speak the way Michael would have spoken, a little more relaxed, with a hint of a smile in the corners of his mouth. "Business, you understand." "Oh, of course, sir." The concierge nodded understandingly. "Shall I have the car ready for tomorrow morning?" I shook my head. "No need," I replied. "I'm working from home tomorrow." He nodded and I walked to the elevators, feeling my palms sweat. The first test was passed, but that was just the beginning. Michael's penthouse occupied the entire top floor of the building. When the elevator doors opened, I stood before a double door made of dark wood. Inserting the key, I entered my brother's apartment, and for a moment it seemed to me that he was about to come out of the next room with a glass of whiskey, smiling his signature smile. But the apartment greeted me with silence. Luxurious, sterile silence of a modern art showroom. Everything here screamed money, from the marble floor in the hallway to the panoramic windows overlooking the city. The white walls were decorated with abstract paintings in minimalist frames. The furniture looked as if it had never been used, and the giant crystal chandelier above the dining table probably cost more than my house in the suburbs. I slowly walked through the living room, noting the impeccable order. Not a speck of dust, not a single item out of place. On the coffee table, neatly stacked financial magazines. On the chest of drawers, a photo of our parents in a silver frame. I took it in my hands, peering into the long-gone faces. I wondered if they would be proud of us now. A soldier who became a security consultant and a financier involved in corporate murders. The answering machine on the phone was blinking red, showing 7 unheard messages. I pressed the button. "Mr. Hart, this is Dr. Allen, reminding you of your annual checkup next Wednesday." "Mike, this is Richard from legal. Those merger documents." "Michael, darling, this is Veronica. You simply must attend my charity evening next Friday. The whole of Manhattan will be there." Nothing remarkable. The ordinary life of a successful financier. No indication that the owner of the apartment was dead or involved in criminal activity. I continued the inspection. In the kitchen, a set of professional knives, never used, and a wine cabinet with a collection probably worth as much as a small car. In the bedroom, a huge bed with a perfectly made gray blanket and a stack of books on the bedside table. Michael had always been a bookworm, the only trait we really shared as children. Finally, I reached the study, a spacious room overlooking Central Park. Here, among the bookshelves and expensive office furniture, I began to methodically search for any traces of Project Perseus. My brother died collecting evidence, and I had to find it before someone else did. Searching the study took more than an hour. I looked through every paper, every book, every desk drawer. Nothing. But in the video, Michael mentioned a safe behind a Hopper painting. I examined the walls and noticed a canvas hanging opposite the desk, a lonely silhouette of a person against the backdrop of a roadside cafe. Classic Hopper, gloomy and disturbing. Removing the painting, I discovered a safe built into the wall. The digital lock was blinking green, waiting for the code. Michael said our date of birth. I typed 6 digits, 4/15/83. The lock beeped and the door clicked open. Inside were several folders, flash drives, a box with some medals, and a small photo album in a leather binding. I took everything out and laid it out on the table. Where to start? Deciding that the photos might give the quickest idea of what Michael was involved in, I opened the album. On the very first page, my world collapsed. Caitlin, my wife, on the white sheets, looking over her shoulder at the photographer with that special smile that a woman gives only to her man. I turned the page. Again, it was her in black lingerie that I had never seen. Then again, in the bathroom, in a white shirt, obviously belonging to a man. The next photo hit me in the gut, Caitlin and Michael together, face to face, his hand in her hair. All the photos were dated, over the last 3 months. The room swam before my eyes. I slammed the album shut and clenched my fists so hard that my knuckles turned white. Deep breath. Exhale. Another breath. A technique we were taught to use before a sniper shot. Clear your mind. Focus. But the feelings washed over me in a wave: rage, pain, humiliation. My brother and my wife. Lovers. They met behind my back, laughed at me while I slammed my fist on the table, and the expensive mahogany groaned piteously. Useless. I needed to focus on the task. I opened one of the folders and saw printouts of emails between Michael and Caitlin. James is going away again for a few days. Come over. I can't wait to see you. These meetings are the only thing that helps me hold on. Zarov was asking about your brother. I assured him that James suspects nothing. Project Perseus is progressing. Morgan has practically finished the new formula. My gaze clung to the phrases like a climber to the ledges of a cliff. Caitlin knew about Project Perseus. She was a part of it. And Michael was discussing me with her, with Zarov. There were notes in the margins of some of the printouts, written in Michael's hand. How could I have gotten to this? This has to stop. I looked around the study and noticed a bar in the corner. Going to it, I pulled out the first bottle I could find, some kind of expensive single malt whiskey. I uncorked it and took a big swig right from the neck. Liquid fire rolled down my esophagus, and I closed my eyes, allowing the alcohol to dull the sharp pain of betrayal. My wife and my brother, my wife and my brother. These words beat in my temples like a spell, like a curse. The whiskey helped me gather my thoughts. Setting the bottle aside, I returned to the table and continued to study the materials from the safe. One of the flash drives was labeled Perseus, full documentation. I plugged it into Michael's computer on the desk. The screen came to life, asking for a password. I tried our date of birth, nothing. The day our parents died, again, nothing. The day his company was founded, his car number, all misses. I was ready to give up when I suddenly remembered Michael's strange habit. He always used the names of his favorite characters from books as passwords. I typed Atticus Finch, the name of the main character of To Kill a Mockingbird, a book that Michael reread every year. The screen blinked and the computer unlocked. The flash drive contained dozens of files, neatly arranged in folders. I opened a document called Perseus Overview and began to read. What appeared before my eyes made me forget about the personal betrayal. Project Perseus turned out to be a program of corporate murders organized by Viktor Zarov, head of Archer Investments. The essence was simple and monstrous. The company selected executives of competing firms and eliminated them with the help of untraceable poisons developed by Dr. Alan Morgan, head of the research department. The poisons mimicked natural causes of death, heart attacks, strokes, aneurysms, and left no traces that could be detected during an autopsy. An important part of the scheme was that Archer Investments played short on the stocks of companies whose executives became targets in advance. After the CEO's death, predictably, the shares fell, and Archer made millions on financial maneuvers. The documents included lists of victims, 8 people over the last 3 years. All successful executives, all suddenly dead from natural causes. Some were accompanied by photos from the scenes, obtained God knows how, and medical reports confirming nonviolent death. I browsed the graphs of stock price changes after each death. The fall, then the purchase of shares at a low price, then a slow rise as the panic subsided. Pure, cold logic of profit, separated from human lives by the sterility of numbers and graphs. A separate folder was devoted to Dr. Morgan and his developments. Dry scientific terms hid a simple truth. This man created the perfect weapon of murder. Morgan described his poisons with the pride of a scientist who had achieved perfection in his field. No moral qualms, no doubts, only technical details and instructions for use. But the most horrifying document I found was in the folder Strategy. It was a memorandum from Viktor Zarov, outlining the philosophy of Perseus. Business is war, and in war there are casualties. We are simply more effective in choosing who those casualties will be. Nature itself eliminates the weak, we only accelerate this process. Every elimination must look natural. This is our main principle. The second principle is that profit always justifies the means. These words, printed on the official company letterhead, sounded like the manifesto of a sociopath, a person for whom human lives were only obstacles to a goal. I leaned back in my chair, trying to grasp the scale of the crimes. My brother was a part of this. My brother helped plan murders, and my wife knew about it, participated. Did life really mean so little to these people? Immersed in reading, I didn't notice that night had fallen. New York outside the window had turned into an ocean of lights, and I was still sorting through the files, putting together a picture of Zarov's criminal empire. Opening the folder marked Next Targets, I expected to see a list of the next CEOs, but instead I found my own photo. Close up, me leaving the gym that I visited twice a week. Another shot, me at my house, loading equipment into the car. The photos were accompanied by a dossier detailed, as if compiled by professional intelligence. My habits, routes, clients, places where I had lunch, even the brand of coffee that I preferred. All this was documented with terrifying accuracy. Attached to the file was an email from Zarov to Michael. Your brother is becoming a problem. His connections in the security industry may lead him to our trail. Moreover, he served with Warren, who is already asking questions. The issue must be resolved by the end of the month. Morgan is already working on the formula. I felt cold sweat break out on my back. They were planning to kill me, and judging by everything, not just planning, actively preparing. And Michael, what did Michael reply? In the same folder, I found a small envelope. Inside, a handwritten note, Michael's handwriting nervous with a heavy pressure. This has gone too far. I won't let them kill James. I'd rather die myself but stop this madness. I pressed the note to my chest, feeling my eyes fill with hot moisture. Michael didn't just die by accident. He sacrificed himself to save me. My brother, whom I considered a traitor, was actually a hero. But if Michael decided to get out of the game and protect me, why didn't he come to me directly? Why didn't he tell me everything at once, but instead collected evidence secretly? The answer came when I returned to Caitlin's letters. In one of them she wrote, I can't lose James, but if he finds out about us or about Perseus, I'll lose him anyway. You have no idea what it's like to live with a man who sees the world only in black and white. For him, there are no half-tones, no compromises. If he finds out, he'll go to the police and we'll all end up behind bars, including you. Michael replied, I know my brother better than you do. He's always been sickeningly righteous. But I can't let Zarov kill him. I'll figure something out. This was the last exchange of letters between them, dated a week earlier. Kaitlyn knew. She knew I was going to be killed and did nothing. Moreover, she actually approved of it, only worrying about not getting her hands dirty. The rage that I had been carefully holding back finally broke through. I swept everything off the table, and the documents scattered across the floor like autumn leaves. Anger demanded an outlet, demanded action, to go home now, look Kaitlyn in the eyes, demand an explanation. But that would be stupid. Now my task was to complete what Michael had started, collect all the evidence, infiltrate Archer Investments, and help the FBI catch Zarov red-handed. And with Kaitlyn, I'll deal with her later. I spent several hours tidying up the documents and copying the files from Michael's computer. Suddenly, the silence of the apartment was broken by a doorbell ring. I froze, looking at the video intercom camera. On the screen was the face of a young woman, a slender brunette with a serious expression. She was holding a folder of documents. Who was this? Michael's colleague, another mistress, or someone from Zarov? I decided not to open the door, but the woman rang again, persistently and demandingly. "Michael, I know you're home. This is urgent," she said into the microphone. Well, sooner or later I would have to start playing the role of my brother. Why not now? I straightened my shoulders, smoothed my hair, a gesture I often saw Michael make, and went to open the door. The woman gave me an anxious look. "Finally, I've been trying to reach you all day." She slipped past me into the apartment without waiting for an invitation. The confidence in her movements indicated that she had been here many times. "Here are the documents on the merger with Global Farm that you asked me to prepare for Monday." She held out the folder. "I practically had to steal them from the legal department, but you know how persuasive I can be." I took the folder, trying to act as naturally as possible. "Thank you, that really helps." She paused, studying me. Her eyes, dark, attentive, narrowed. "Something's wrong," she said assertively. "You're acting strangely." I tried to brush it off. "Just tired, tough week." She shook her head. "No, that's not it." She took a step back, continuing to study me carefully. "You're not Michael," she suddenly said. "You're his brother. I saw your picture on Michael's desk." I opened my mouth to object, but she cut me off. "Michael never holds his hands like that, and he would have taken the folder from me right away without even inviting me in. And he wouldn't have called me Miss. By the way, my name is Carla, Carla Evans, your brother's assistant." She crossed her arms over her chest. "Where's Michael?" I realized that denial was pointless. This woman knew my brother well. "Can we talk?" I asked, pointing to the living room. She nodded, keeping a wary eye on me. We sat in chairs across from each other. I took a deep breath. "My name is James Hart. Michael, my brother died 3 days ago, an accident in the mountains." Her face twitched and contorted, as if a knife had been thrust into her back, but she quickly composed herself. "I knew something had happened," she said quietly. "He hasn't been himself these last few weeks, nervous, distracted, locked himself in the study, whispered on the phone." She looked up at me. "It wasn't an accident, was it?" I was impressed by her insight. "No," I replied after a pause. "It wasn't, and I'm here to find out what happened." "Project Perseus," she said, and it wasn't a question. I tensed. "You know about it?" "Not everything, but enough to understand it's something dangerous and illegal. Michael never said it directly, but I heard his conversations with Zarov. I saw strange documents. And," she hesitated, "the last time I saw Michael, he looked as if he had made some important decision. He said a strange thing to me. Sometimes you have to choose between what's right and what's profitable. I've been choosing profit for too long." She looked at me defiantly. "If you're here to continue his work, I'll help you, because Michael wasn't a stranger to me. But we need to act fast before anyone notices his absence." I stared silently at Carla, trying to decide if I could trust her. On the one hand, she was close to Michael and may have known more about Project Perseus than she was saying. On the other, if she worked for Zarov, she would have already called security, rather than sitting here offering help. "Why do you want to help?" I finally asked. She smiled slightly. "Because Michael was the only person in that company who treated me like a human being, not like a machine for carrying out instructions. And because what Zarov is doing is wrong. I've suspected it for a long time." I nodded and decided. I showed her part of the documents that I had found, enough for her to understand the scale of the crimes, but not everything. I still wasn't ready to trust her completely. Her face paled as she read the descriptions of the murders and financial machinations. I knew that the company's affairs weren't entirely clean, but this, she shook her head, this is monstrous. "Michael left a video message," I said. "He wanted me to replace him at the investment conference in London in a week. While everyone thinks he's alive, we have a chance to collect the final evidence against Zarov and the entire top management of Archer." Carla nodded thoughtfully. "A bold plan. Risky, but it might work. Zarov, Morgan, and all the key figures will be at the conference, if you can get direct confessions." "For that I need to become Michael," I interrupted her. "Convincingly play his role. Will I be able to do it?" She looked at me assessingly. "Outwardly, you look very similar, but there are differences in manners, in speech, in habits. And of course, you need to know more about finance than just distinguishing stocks from bonds. There are 5 days until the conference. Is that enough?" Carla smiled, and in her smile, I saw determination. "There are 5 days until the conference. During that time, I have to turn you into your brother enough to fool people who worked with him every day." She stood up. "Let's start right now. We have a lot of work to do." We sat up until late at night making a plan. Carla told me about Michael's habits, about his gestures, about how he communicated with colleagues. I took notes, asked questions, and tried to delve into the complex world of finance, which had always been a mystery to me. "And what about the FBI?" Carla asked at some point. "Michael said he gave them the documents." "My colleague is checking that," I replied, thinking of Sam. "If it's true, then our task is to give them the final evidence, confessions from Zarov himself." Carla nodded. "It won't be easy. He's very careful and never talks directly about liquidations. Always uses euphemisms, gives orders through third parties." "At the conference, we'll try to provoke him," I said. "Make him say something that can be used against him." "A dangerous game," Carla remarked, "if he suspects deception." I didn't finish, but we both understood. If Zarov revealed the substitution, I would become the next victim of Project Perseus. And maybe Carla too. The hardest thing for me was to realize that I would have to not only pretend to be Michael, but also interact with Caitlin as if I were her lover. The thought of this evoked mixed feelings of anger and grief in me, but I understood that I had to play this role perfectly. "You can do it," Carla said, as if reading my thoughts. "Michael believed in you. He knew that you would be able to finish what he started." I nodded, feeling determination pushing out doubts. "For Michael's sake, for the sake of justice. And for the sake of all those who may become the next victims if we fail," Carla added quietly. We continued our work, delving deeper and deeper into the details of the upcoming operation. Outside the skyscrapers of New York, millions of lights shone, indifferent to our plans and fears. Somewhere there among those lights was the office of Archer Investments, the lair of killers in expensive suits, and I was going to enter it, pretending to be one of them. Chapter 3: Masquerade. Mom always said that Michael and I were 2 halves of one whole. In childhood, I believed that nonsense. In youth, I hated it. In adulthood, I just ignored it. But now, trying to become my brother, I realized that there was a whole universe of differences between us. My hands remembered the weight of weapons, his only handshakes and touching the keyboard. My gaze always looked for threats, his opportunities. I spoke only when there was something to say. He turned speech into an art. And yet, despite this abyss, his face looked back at me in the mirror. My face, our face. Maybe Mom was right, we really were two parts of one whole. And now that one part had died, a double burden fell on me, to be myself and to become him, not even suspecting that in the process I would find something more than I had lost. No, 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 Carla shook her head irritably. Michael never holds his hands like that. Your movements are too military. I lowered my hands and looked at myself in the mirror. The last 4 days had turned into an endless training session. We fell asleep at dawn and woke up at noon, using every minute to prepare for my debut at Archer Investments. Michael's penthouse had become our camp, the battlefield on which I fought with my own nature. Show me again, I asked. Carla stood up and leaned slightly over an imaginary table, leaning on her left arm, casually, as if by chance, but at the same time with a calculation unnoticeable to the ordinary eye. See, he always leans forward a little when he's interested, but not too much, and never ever crosses his arms over his chest. He considers it a sign of closedness, and Michael always demonstrates openness, even when he's lying. I repeated the movement, trying to catch the subtle nuances. Better, Carla nodded, but you're still too wary. I'm always like that, I shrugged. Michael isn't. She came closer. Michael is relaxed, confident in his irresistibility. He seems to know in advance that everyone around him will say yes to any request he makes. I smiled wryly. Sounds arrogant. It is, Carla unexpectedly agreed. But that arrogance is so charming that people are willing to forgive him. Michael smiles and everyone thinks they're special, that only they got a sincere smile. Something personal slipped into her voice, and I caught myself thinking that I didn't like the way she talked about my brother, as if he was, who? Her boss, someone bigger. You were close, I asked, unable to contain my curiosity. Carla turned away, pretending to look for something in the stack of papers on the table. Professionally, yes. I knew more about his work than anyone else in the company. Personally, she paused. Michael kept his distance with everyone. Except for my wife, I thought, but kept silent. Instead, I went to the table and picked up one of the financial reports that Carla had brought for my training. Let's get back to work. I still don't understand how hedging differs from shorting. She nodded, clearly grateful for the change of topic. We spent the next hours delving into the thickets of financial terminology. For me, it was like learning Chinese in a week, but Carla turned out to be a patient and methodical teacher. Closer to evening, we switched to practicing meeting scenarios. Carla laid out photos of Archer employees on the table and played out possible dialogues. I had to answer the way Michael would have answered. Richard Goldstein, Legal Department. Michael, we need to discuss the latest deal with the East Asian Fund. There are regulatory issues. I tilted my head slightly and said with a soft smile, Richard, I appreciate your vigilance, but let's postpone this until my return from London. I'm sure you can handle any questions. Good, Carla smiled approvingly. You understood the main thing. Michael uses compliments to postpone difficult decisions. We continued until late at night, interrupted only by ordered food and occasional 5-minute breaks. Carla was tireless, correcting my posture, intonation, prompting the necessary financial terms. She made me watch videos of Michael's speeches, analyzing every gesture, every smile. I had to become a perfect copy, not raising the slightest suspicion. Closer to dawn, when we were both exhausted to the limit, Carla suddenly said, You know what's strangest? Sometimes I forget that you're not him. I looked at her with interest. Is that a good sign? The best possible, she smiled weakly. If I, who knew him daily for 3 years, can forget that you're an imposter, then we're on the right track. Imposter. That word caught something deep inside. Hadn't I been an imposter my whole life, trying to meet the expectations of my parents, then the army, then Kaitlin, and now the image of a deceased brother? When was the last time I was myself? And who is that I really? Monday came too quickly. The morning was clear and cold, a perfect day to start my masquerade mission. I stood before the mirror in Michael's bedroom, watching Carla adjust the collar of my shirt, perfectly white, perfectly starched. A suit from some Italian designer, a watch worth as much as a used car, shoes polished to a shine. I looked like a stranger in my own skin. Remember, Carla spoke quietly, almost intimately, the main thing is confidence. You're not just the chief financial officer, you're one of the most influential people in the company. Everyone is waiting for your approval, your attention. I nodded, feeling my pulse quicken. Strange, I had been under fire in Fallujah and didn't experience such excitement. But now, in the face of the unknown in the marble corridors of a financial empire, I felt defenseless. Everything will be fine, Carla seemed to read my thoughts. Just follow the plan. Archer Investments was located in a 40-story building of glass and steel in the financial district of New York. The facade shimmered in the morning sun, like a giant mirror. People in expensive suits and with expensive briefcases entered and exited through revolving doors, like ants serving their queen. Carla met me in the lobby, as agreed. Now she acted formally, with professional restraint, which was completely different from our interaction in Michael's penthouse. "Good morning, Mr. Hart," she said loud enough for the employees standing nearby to hear. "You have a busy day today." I nodded, trying to look as if I was here every day of my life. "Coffee in my office in 5 minutes, please." She inclined her head slightly. "Of course, sir." We passed through the access control system. My pass, or rather Michael's pass, worked without problems. The security guard at the counter greeted me with a nod. I responded with a light smile, as Michael would have done. The elevator took us to the 32nd floor. The doors opened into a spacious space filled with natural light. Huge floor-to-ceiling windows, designer furniture, muted conversations, and the clatter of keyboards. Money was felt almost physically here, in the quality of the finish, in the cold shine of the glass partitions, in the barely perceptible aroma of expensive perfume. "Good morning, Mr. Hart," greeted a young woman at the reception desk. "How was your weekend?" "Productive, Melanie," I replied, grateful to Carla for the detailed briefing on the employees' names. "How is your daughter? Has she recovered?" The woman beamed. "Yes, thank you for asking. She's already gone to school." I smiled and walked on. Carla followed me, whispering, "Well done." Michael's office turned out to be exactly as Carla described it, spacious, with a view of Manhattan, minimalist in design. A dark wood desk, a leather chair, several abstract paintings on the walls. A photo of our parents in a silver frame, exactly the same as in the penthouse. And nothing personal. "The morning meeting is in 10 minutes in the conference room," Carla reminded me, putting a cup of coffee on the table. "The main topics are the quarterly report and preparations for the London conference." I nodded, trying to look confident. "The materials." She held out a folder. "Everything is here. I've marked the key points." The meeting went better than I expected. I spoke little, mostly listening and nodding in the right places, sometimes asking clarifying questions that Carla and I had rehearsed in advance. No one seemed to notice anything strange, except that several colleagues noted that I looked tired. If only they knew the truth. After the meeting, Carla took me around the office, formally presenting projects, but actually helping me navigate the labyrinth of Archer Investments. I carefully remembered the locations of the offices of key figures. Zarov on the top floor, Morgan in a special laboratory on a closed floor. The day ended with a meeting with a financial analyst where I had to discuss the company's investment strategy for the next quarter. Thanks to Carla's cheat sheets and intensive preparation, I managed to keep the conversation going without arousing suspicion. But after the analyst left, I collapsed into my chair, feeling drained like a lemon. "You did well," Carla said quietly when we were alone. "The first day is always the hardest." I looked at her gratefully. "Without you, I would have failed in the first 5 minutes." She smiled slightly, and there was something new in that smile, something that I hadn't noticed before. The second day started more calmly. I had already settled into the role of Michael and felt more confident. Carla met me in the lobby with the usual "Good morning, Mr. Hart," and a plan for the day. Everything was going according to schedule until around noon, when she burst into the office with panic in her eyes. "We have a problem," she said, lowering her voice. "Your wife is here, looking for you." I felt my back turn cold. Caitlin, here. Carla didn't have time to warn me that my wife might show up at the office. "What is she?" I began, but the office door swung open. Caitlin looked exactly as I remembered her, flawless blonde hair pulled back in a high ponytail, a business suit accentuating her figure, light makeup. My wife, my brother's lover, a traitor. "Michael, finally," she came to me with a quick step. "I was calling you all night." I froze for a moment, fighting the urge to tell her everything that had accumulated over these days. But instead, I smiled that special smile that I had practiced with Carla, slightly arrogant, but charming. "Sorry, dear, I was busy preparing for the conference." Caitlin glanced at Carla. "Could you leave us?" Carla looked at me questioningly, and I nodded. "Thank you, Miss Evans. We'll continue later." As soon as the door closed behind Carla, Caitlin grabbed my hand and dragged me into the far corner of the office, away from the door. "Why weren't you answering my messages?" I was worried. My heart was pounding so hard that it seemed she should hear it beating. I looked at the woman I once loved more than life and didn't recognize her. Or maybe I finally saw the real her. "I was busy," I repeated, trying to make my voice sound natural. "A lot of work before the conference." She frowned. "You're acting strangely." "Just tired." I moved to the window, pretending to admire the view. In reality, I just needed to turn away so she wouldn't see my face. "James still suspects nothing?" she asked, coming closer. "Where is he? Did he leave on a business trip? When are we going to deal with him? Counting on him dying there doesn't work. He is still a tough nut to crack, and the mission he was sent on, or as they call it in the military as far as I understood, isn't dangerous." Each word was like a stab in the back. Deal with him. She was planning my murder as calmly as she would plan a vacation. I felt nauseous but forced myself to answer. "Soon, very soon." I barely contained my anger, and I am sure that some of it leaked into my voice. But Caitlin didn't notice. She came up behind me and hugged me, pressing herself against my back. Her perfume, a familiar scent that used to be associated with home, with safety. Now it evoked only disgust. "I missed you. Do you understand what I'm talking about?" she whispered. "Maybe we'll meet tonight. James won't be back for another week." I slowly turned around and looked her in the eyes. "Sorry, I have too much work. After the conference," I cleared my throat, trying to control the trembling in my voice. "By the way, how is your quarterly report progressing?" Caitlin looked disappointed but nodded. "Too bad, the report. It's almost finished. It will be ready for your return from London." She reached up to kiss me, and I couldn't evade without arousing suspicion. Her lips touched mine, dry, warm, alien. I forced myself to return the kiss, imagining that I was kissing someone else. Anyone, just not her. When she finally left, I locked myself in the office and stared out the window for a long time, trying to calm my racing heart. Carla quietly came in a few minutes later and silently held out a glass of water. I drank it in one gulp. "She talked about my murder as if she were discussing the weather," I said bitterly. Carla put her warm hand on my shoulder, an unexpected but comforting gesture. "We need to continue," she reminded me softly. For Michael's sake, for the sake of justice. I nodded, feeling determination return. Revenge is a dish best served cold, and I'll serve it just like that. By the middle of the week, I had practically settled into Archer Investments. Employees greeted me by name. I remembered what everyone did and could keep up professional conversations thanks to intensive preparation with Carla. But the real test awaited me on Wednesday, a meeting with Dr. Alan Morgan, the creator of the poisons for Project Perseus. Morgan worked in a special laboratory located on a closed floor of the building. Access there was only for top executives of the company and Morgan himself. Carla guided me through a complex security system, and we went down in the elevator to a floor that officially didn't exist. The laboratory resembled a set from a movie about a mad scientist, sterile white walls, metal tables strewn with test tubes and strange equipment, computers with graphs and formulas on the screens. And in the midst of all this, Dr. Morgan himself, a skinny man of middle age with piercing blue eyes and nervous, jerky movements. "Ah, Michael," he said, not looking up from the microscope, finally deigned to appear. "Dr. Morgan," I nodded, trying to imitate the tense, polite tone that, according to Carla, Michael used to communicate with the scientist. "How is the work progressing?" Morgan straightened up and gave me an assessing look that seemed to penetrate right under my skin. "I've perfected the formula for London," he pointed to a sealed flask on the table. "It works by contact interaction through the skin. One touch is enough, like that Russian Novichok, only this one really works." I came closer, trying to maintain external calm, although everything was boiling with rage inside. This man was creating the means for murder as coolly as other scientists develop medicines. "Tell me more," I asked, remembering that Carla had mentioned Michael's interest in scientific details. Morgan perked up. "This is a modified version of last year's formula, but with the addition of a component that accelerates the cardiotoxic effect. Death occurs 6 to 8 hours after contact, depending on body weight and overall health." He spoke as if he were describing the features of a new phone model. "The symptoms are identical to myocardial infarction. No pathologist will suspect poisoning." I nodded, trying to hide my disgust. "Impressive, but what about delivery? How do we make sure the target gets the dose?" Morgan chuckled, a sound like metal scraping against glass. "I've created a special device. Looks like a ring." He showed a thin silver ring on his finger. "During a handshake or any other touch, a microneedle comes out and injects the dose. The target won't even feel the prick." I felt nauseous, but forced myself to continue. "And there's no way to detect traces of the substance after death?" "None." Morgan looked at me with sudden suspicion. "You've never been interested in delivery details before, Michael. Usually, you only cared about chemical formulas. Why now?" I frantically tried to find a plausible explanation. "Richard Dawson, the CEO of Neuropharm, will be in London. Zarov wants me to personally oversee the situation. I just want to make sure everything goes smoothly." Morgan stared at me for a long time without blinking, then slowly nodded. "I see. Well, you can rest assured. The formula has been tested and is reliable, unless, of course, you've lost your vaunted determination." "My determination is with me," I replied, holding his gaze, "but I prefer to know all the details of the operation." He nodded, but something in his gaze changed. Distrust, suspicion. I couldn't say for sure, but I felt this man saw more than he showed. When Carla and I left the laboratory, I felt my palms getting wet with tension. "I'm not sure he bought it," she said quietly when we were already in the elevator. "Morgan is very observant, and he has a phenomenal memory for details." "Do you think he suspected something?" "Possibly. We'll have to be more careful." I didn't know then that Morgan had called Zarov immediately after our departure with a message about his suspicions. Maybe he's just overworked before the conference, but I'll be watching him. the scientist said, looking after the departing elevator with a piercing, assessing gaze. Carla and I spent the evenings after work in Michael's penthouse, preparing for the upcoming conference in London. The stakes rose with each passing day. We knew this would be our only chance to obtain irrefutable evidence against Zarov and his team. Carla patiently explained to me the complex financial schemes that I would have to present at the conference. Our hands sometimes accidentally touched over the documents, and each time that contact caused a strange warmth spreading up my arm. Our eyes met more and more often, lingering for a split second longer than necessary. Here, she pointed to a diagram of the investment portfolio. You'll have to explain why Archer is betting on the pharmaceutical sector. Because they're planning to kill another CEO and profit from the fall in stocks, I replied grimly. Carla sighed. Yes, but you can't say that at the presentation. I know, I rubbed my eyes. Fatigue was building up like a toxin in my blood. It's just that sometimes I can't believe this is really happening, that there are people who so coldly kill for profit. In the rare moments of rest, Carla and I talked about life, about how she, a Yale graduate with a degree in English literature, ended up in the world of finance. I needed to pay for my sister's education, she simply said. About my service in the Marine Corps, about the countries I had visited, about the people I had met. You know what's strange? She said one evening as we sat on the balcony looking at the lights of nighttime New York. I worked with your brother for 3 years, but I've learned more about you in a few days than about him in all that time. I looked at her, tired but determined, with dark circles under her eyes and a stubborn furrow between her brows. Michael was always secretive, I replied. Even as a child, he seemed to have a secret life that he wouldn't let anyone into. And you, she asked, are you secretive too? I pondered. Probably, but in a different way. Not so much to hide something, but so as not to burden others. Carla nodded understandingly. You don't want people to bear your burdens. Something like that. We were silent, enjoying the rare moment of peace before the storm that inevitably awaited us in London. How are you coping? Carla suddenly asked. With your wife's betrayal, your brother's death, all this madness. I smiled wryly. Do I have a choice? There's always a choice, she said quietly. You could just walk away, forget it, start a new life somewhere where no one knows you. I shook my head. And let them keep killing, forgive the murder of my brother. No, I have to finish what Michael started. On the night before the flight to London, we were rereading the testimony against Zarov and his accomplices. Among the documents, I found a mention that Michael had begun cooperating with the FBI after learning about the plans to kill me. He was still trying to save me, I said quietly, looking at the date just 2 weeks before his death. Carla, sitting at the table next to me, put her hand on my shoulder. He loved you in his own way. Her eyes, tired but sincere, looked at me with something resembling tenderness. Or maybe I just wanted to think so. But at that moment, something new arose between us, fragile as the first ice, but real. Understanding. Connection. I didn't know then where this would lead us. I only knew that for the first time in a long time, I felt something other than anger and pain. On the eve of our departure to London, when Carla had gone to get tickets and documents, I decided to inspect Michael's apartment once more. Something was bothering me, the feeling that we had missed some important detail. In the bedroom, I noticed a slight irregularity on the parquet floor near the bed. Kneeling down, I ran my hand over the floor and felt that one of the planks was slightly movable. With a quiet click, it gave way, revealing a small space under the floor. Inside was a USB drive, sealed in a plastic bag, and an envelope. I took them out, feeling my pulse quicken, another of Michael's secrets. In the envelope was a note written in familiar handwriting. James, if you found this, then I'm dead. This is a backup of all the evidence I sent to the FBI. Agent Collins is my contact. Use this if everything goes wrong. Plugging the flash drive into the computer, I discovered a complete copy of all the financial transactions of Project Perseus, and more importantly, audio recordings of meetings at which Zarov openly discussed the murders. On one of the recordings, I heard Keitlin's voice, cold, businesslike, discussing eliminating the problem as calmly as ordinary people discuss weekend plans. It was almost physically painful to listen to this, but I forced myself to listen to the end. I needed to know the truth, the whole truth, no matter how bitter it was. When Carla returned, I showed her the find. "This is what we need, but still not enough," she said, after looking through the files. "If you add direct confessions to what we have, then the FBI will really be able to arrest the entire top management of Archer." I nodded. "We need to check if Michael really contacted the FBI." That same evening, I called Sam, who confirmed that she had found Agent Collins and was convinced that the FBI was indeed conducting a secret investigation into Archer Investments. "They're waiting for irrefutable proof to arrest the top management of the company," Sam said. "The conference is the perfect place to get that evidence. All the key players will be there." We discussed the details of the plan. I was to provoke Zarov into confessions and record them, and Sam was to hand these recordings over to Agent Collins, who would be waiting near the conference center. "Be careful, Hart," Sam said before hanging up. "These people will stop at nothing." "I know," I replied. "That's why we have to stop them first." That night I slept uneasily. I dreamed of Michael, not as I had seen him on the video, tormented and frightened, but young, self-assured as he had been before our paths diverged. He was looking at me with a kind of sad smile and saying something that I couldn't make out. I woke up in a cold sweat with the feeling that my brother was trying to warn me. But about what? Outside the window, it was raining, blurring the lights of the city. Tomorrow we fly to London. Tomorrow the real game begins. I felt that the point of no return had already been passed, and all that remained was to go forward to meet whatever lay ahead. Chapter 4: Exposure. In the theater of the ancient world, actors wore masks so that viewers, even from the back rows, could distinguish the emotions of the characters. I too wore a mask, the face of my brother, but unlike the ancient Greeks, hoped that no one would discern the real feelings raging beneath it. Anger, betrayal, fear, the thirst for justice. In London, a city where fog hides sins, the story of my pretense was to end. Michael, my brother and my shadow, had brought me here with a final message from beyond the grave. And here, too, another betrayal awaited me, this time from a person whose eyes I looked into every morning when I shaved. From myself, because the role I had so carefully immersed myself in had begun to change me. Because somewhere halfway between hatred and vengeance, I realized that I no longer knew what I wanted more, to punish the murderers or simply move on. London greeted us with a drizzling rain and a raw cold that penetrated to the bone even through Michael's expensive coat. The city seemed to deliberately create a setting for our little thriller. Gray clouds, wet asphalt reflecting the lights of taxis, and a thick fog that shrouded the tops of ancient buildings, as if trying to hide them from prying eyes. The Dorchester Hotel, where the conference was taking place, was exactly as I imagined it, the epitome of old-fashioned British luxury. Marble columns in the lobby, heavy velvet curtains, subdued lighting, and the barely perceptible aroma of antique furniture polish. A place where deals were made that changed the global economy, and where the concierge's polite smile cost no less than his annual salary. Carla and I approached the reception desk, she slightly behind me in a perfectly tailored business suit, with a tablet in her hands and a professional half-smile on her lips. The perfect assistant to a flawless financier. "Michael Hart, Archer Investments," I said with that special intonation that Carla and I had practiced for hours. The casual confidence of a man used to having his name open all doors. The receptionist, a young woman with a flawless accent from a prestigious school, lit up with a smile. "Welcome to the Dorchester, Mr. Hart. We are delighted to see you again. Your suite is ready." She held out an electronic key. "Miss Evans will be accommodated in the adjacent room as you requested." I nodded, catching out of the corner of my eye how Carla tensed. This detail was not in our briefing. Obviously, Michael always stayed here with his assistant next door. Another small piece of the puzzle of my brother's life. After going up to the room, the first thing I did was check the room for listening devices, an old habit left over from my time in service. Carla watched my actions silently, leaning against the door jamb. "Do you think Zarov could have installed bugs here?" she asked when I had finished inspecting. "I doubt it, but it doesn't hurt to be on the safe side," I replied, going to the window. The suite offered a view of Hyde Park, where lonely figures hurried to shelter from the rain under the crowns of trees. In the distance, the spires and domes of old London were visible, drowning in the fog like ghosts of bygone empires. I drew the curtains and turned to Carla. "The schedule." She opened the tablet. "A welcome cocktail at 6 in the evening. Tomorrow at 10 in the morning, your presentation with the investment strategy presentation. At 1 in the afternoon, a closed meeting of the management with Zarov." I nodded. "The closed meeting is where we have to get the confessions. Sam will be watching outside and waiting for the signal." Carla and I spent the next hour checking the recording equipment, a miniature recorder built into the watch and a backup system in the phone. Everything had to work perfectly. We wouldn't have a second chance. Closer to evening, descending to the lobby, I felt my palms get damp with tension. It was like the feeling before a combat operation. The same adrenaline rush, the same heightened attentiveness to everything around. Only now my weapons were not a rifle, but words and the mask that I wore. The hotel lobby was filled with hundreds of people in evening wear, the elite of the financial world from across the globe. Men in flawless suits, women sparkling with diamonds and smiles. The air was filled with the scent of expensive perfume, the clinking of glasses, and quiet classical music played by a string quartet. "Over there," Carla whispered, discreetly pointing towards the bar, "Gregory Lang, head of the European division. And next to him is Sarah Miller, director of communications." I nodded, fixing the faces. Carla continued to comment quietly, nomming the names and positions of key figures. I listened absently, preparing internally for the main meeting. And then he appeared, Viktor Zarov, the man behind the murder of my brother and planning my death. He was taller than I had expected, with an athletic build that strangely contrasted with his almost aristocratic manners. Dark hair with graying temples, a piercing gaze, and a smile that didn't reach the eyes. He moved through the crowd like a shark through a school of small fish, confidently, purposefully, and with a latent, predatory grace. Noticing me, he headed in our direction, breaking into a smile. "Michael, glad you could make it." His handshake was firm but not aggressive. His tone was warm but with subtle notes of patronage. "How was the flight?" "Uneventful," I replied, trying to imitate Michael's manner of communication, which Carla and I had practiced. "London greeted us with rain, as always." "Oh, the local weather is part of the charm," Zarov laughed. "We have an important day tomorrow. I hope you've prepared an impressive presentation." As always, I allowed myself a confident half-smile. Our eyes met, and for a moment it seemed to me that he saw through my mask. But Zarov only nodded and turned away, greeting other guests. In the crowd, I noticed Sam, dressed as a journalist with a badge from some financial publication. She nodded to me subtly, confirming that everything was going according to plan. And against the far wall stood Dr. Morgan, watching me from under his brows, like a scientist watching an experimental specimen. A shiver ran down my spine. The party was just beginning, and I already felt that our disguise was cracking at the seams. The morning of the next day passed as in a fog. I gave my presentation practically on autopilot, answered questions with pre-prepared phrases, smiled when required to smile, frowned when I needed to look concerned. Carla's voice in the earpiece directed me when I got lost in the terminology. Say something about market synergy. Mention the investment potential of biotechnology. By noon, she and I retreated to the room for a short respite before the main test, the closed meeting. You did great, Carla said, handing me a glass of water. Even Sarah bought it, and she's known Michael longer than anyone. I shrugged. They see what they expect to see. Michael, a little tired after the flight, but still the same brilliant financier. Still don't relax, Carla checked my watch with the recorder. Zarov is no fool, and Morgan, he was watching you all morning. I know, I ran a hand through my hair, a gesture I had picked up from Michael. But we have no choice. This is our only chance. At 1 in the afternoon, we headed to the conference room where the closed meeting was to take place. Carla stopped at the door. I'll be waiting here. I'll try to distract the guards if something goes wrong. I nodded, squeezing her hand, a brief but expressive gesture of gratitude. Then I took a deep breath and entered the room. The room was small but luxurious. An antique dark wood table, leather chairs, paintings in heavy frames on the walls. The windows were covered with heavy curtains, despite the daytime, and in the center of the table was a strange device, resembling a small metal box. Zarov noticed my gaze. A signal jammer, he explained with a smirk. No phone calls, no recordings. What is discussed in this room stays in this room. I felt my heart clench. If the jammer was working, my recording devices were useless, but it was too late to retreat. In addition to Zarov, Morgan and 5 other top managers of Archer Investments were present in the room. Everyone sat down around the table, and Zarov activated the jammer with the press of a button. A tiny indicator on the device lit up red. Gentlemen, Zarov began, surveying everyone with an attentive gaze, we have an opportunity to significantly increase our assets. The CEO of Neuropharm, Richard Dawson, will present the results of the trials of their new drug today. If they prove successful, the shares will soar. But if Dawson does not live to see his speech, then they will first fall incredibly. However, the results will remain and fundamentally nothing will change in the assessment of the enterprise. And that means that we have a wonderful opportunity to buy cheaply something that is very expensive. A muffled chuckle ran through the room. These people talked about murder as casually as others discussed the weather. Morgan opened a small case. The drug will be administered through contact interaction. A simple handshake is enough. I focused on controlling my breathing so as not to betray my disgust. Instead, I leaned forward with feigned interest. And what about the investigation? Won't suspicions arise if he dies right at the conference? Zarov smiled. You know, Michael, Morgan is a genius. The poison won't take effect immediately. Dawson will feel unwell, return to his room, and there he will be overtaken by what they call in police reports, acute heart failure. And this will happen today, I asked, hoping my voice sounded calm. After the banquet, Zarov nodded. I'll take care of the handshake myself. We are already shorting Neuropharm stocks, awaiting Dawson's death, and will make millions on financial maneuvers. As usual, it will all look like a heart attack, Morgan added. The police won't find anything suspicious. I continued to ask clarifying questions, forcing Zarov to say more, to give details that could become evidence. I hoped that at least one of my devices was somehow working, despite the jammer. Zarov shared his plans with obvious pleasure. He told how the company uses the deaths of competitors to manipulate stocks, how it chooses targets, how it organizes murders that look natural. There was not a shadow of doubt or remorse in his voice, only the cold calculation of a businessman for whom human lives were only numbers in an Excel spreadsheet. And no problems with previous, Operations? I asked. Absolutely none, Zarov replied smugly. 8 successful eliminations in 3 years and not a single suspicion. We've found the perfect formula. Death plus financial manipulation equals profit. Pure mathematics. I noticed Morgan lean toward Zarov and whisper something in his ear. Zarov frowned, and then his gaze slowly returned to me, but now there was something new in it. Suspicion. Forgive my directness, Morgan suddenly said loudly, addressing all those present, but I have to clarify something. All eyes turned to him. I tensed, feeling that something irreparable was about to happen. Morgan leaned forward, looking directly at me. You're not Michael Hart, are you? A heavy silence hung in the room. I felt cold sweat run down my back. I don't understand what you're talking about. I tried to deflect, but Morgan had already risen from his seat. I've been watching you all week. His voice had a strange mixture of admiration and anger. You can fool the others, but not me. I study people all my life, their reactions, micro-expressions, manner of speech. You're his brother, James. It remains to be understood why you're here, but it seems I already have an idea. Everyone present froze. Zarov slowly turned to me, his face resembling a wax mask. Is this true? I realized that the game was over. Further pretense was pointless. Yes, I am James Hart. I straightened up, finally dropping my brother's mask. And Michael is dead thanks to you. Zarov looked genuinely shocked. Michael is dead? It can't be. We didn't give the order. It's not that simple, Morgan interjected. Yes, James was the next target, not Michael. But something went wrong. I should have told you sooner. Kaitlyn. It was she who informed me. Zarov quickly composed himself. Fine, it doesn't matter now. He heard everything he shouldn't have heard. He glanced at the guard at the door. No one should leave this building, especially his assistant. Find her quickly. One of the bodyguards touched his earpiece, receiving or transmitting instructions. I looked around, assessing the situation. 2 guards at the door, 1 at the window. Zarov at the table, Morgan next to him. The other managers looked bewildered, not understanding what was happening. Before you do anything irreversible, I said, trying to buy time, I want to know the whole truth. Who else was involved in the conspiracy against me? At that moment the door opened and Kaitlyn entered the room. She looked flawless, an elegant suit, perfect makeup, hair pulled back in a strict bun. Seeing me, she stopped, as if bumping into an invisible wall. I heard everything, James, she breathed. What are you doing here? I looked at the woman I once loved more than anything in the world and felt only coldness. Strange how quickly love can turn into its semblance. The same strong feeling, but completely opposite in sign. Hello, dear, I said, putting into those words all the emotions I had been holding back since I learned of her betrayal. Surprised. I know about your affair and that you were planning to kill me. Or rather, you were. Kaitlyn paled, but quickly composed herself. The professional mask returned to her face, the same one I had seen so often in the last months of our marriage, not understanding what was hidden behind it. No, you don't understand, she began, taking a step toward me. No, I understand everything perfectly, I interrupted her. You slept with my brother planning my murder. James still suspects nothing. When are we going to deal with him? I quoted her recent words. Her hands trembled, but her voice remained surprisingly calm. You don't understand. It's just business, nothing more. There was so much cold calculation in those words that I almost admired her. Almost. Business, I asked, is killing people business? There's no need to dramatize, Zarov unexpectedly interjected. This is just a more aggressive form of competition. The strongest survives, that's how the world works. The world works the way we create it, I replied, not taking my eyes off Kaitlyn. And you have created hell. Zarov sighed, as if talking to an unreasonable child. Enough drama. Guards, take Mr. Hart and his wife out. Find the assistant urgently. Make sure they don't leave the building." I saw one of the bodyguards discreetly draw his weapon, and I realized that time was running out. For the past few months, I had been playing the role of Michael, but now it was time to remember who I really was. A Navy SEAL, a man trained to survive in any conditions. In one swift movement, I grabbed a heavy chair and threw it at the window. The glass shattered with a deafening crash, letting into the room the noise of the London day and a gust of humid air. Taking advantage of the moment of confusion, I neutralized the nearest guard with a short, precise blow to the solar plexus and snatched his weapon. "Nobody move," I shouted, pointing the gun at Zarov. The guard at the door reached for his weapon but froze when I turned the gun on him. Zarov looked furious, Morgan frightened, and Kaitlyn was looking at me as if she had seen me for the first time. Maybe it was so. Maybe she never knew the real me. What happened next I could not have predicted. The door to the conference room swung open with a crash, and armed FBI agents burst inside, led by Sam and a man in a dark suit who identified himself as Agent Collins. "FBI, everyone stay where they are," Collins' voice boomed. Sam quickly assessed the situation and nodded to me. "I see you've already started the party without us, Hart." Taking advantage of the commotion, I rushed at the nearest guard, who was trying to get a spare weapon, and disarmed him with a short hold. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Zarov dart towards the broken window. "He's getting away," I shouted, rushing after him. Zarov proved surprisingly agile for his age and build. He jumped through the broken window onto a narrow ledge running along the facade of the building and began to make his way towards the fire escape. Without hesitation, I followed him. The rain intensified, making the stone ledge slippery and dangerous. 30 meters above the ground on a narrow strip of stone no wider than my palm was not the most suitable place for a duel, but there was no choice. "Stop," I shouted, approaching Zarov. "You have nowhere to run." He turned around, and in his eyes I saw a strange mixture of contempt and fear. "Your brother was a weakling," he shouted, continuing to retreat. "You're the same." "The difference between us is," I replied, taking a cautious step forward, "that Michael couldn't stop you, but I can." Zarov tried to hit me, but on the slippery ledge, it was a mistake. He lost his balance and almost fell down. I instinctively lunged forward and grabbed him by the hand, not out of pity, but because he had to answer for his crimes. With one jerk, I pulled him back onto the ledge and, using a maneuver honed by years of training, immobilized him, twisting his arm behind his back. "It's over, Zarov," I said, feeling the rain running down my face. "The game is over." FBI agents went up to the roof and arrested Zarov. Returning to the conference room, I saw Kaitlyn and Morgan being led away in handcuffs. My wife looked up, and for a moment our eyes met. "It's all over," I said. "The recording with Zarov's confessions is already with the FBI." There was no remorse in her eyes, only cold calculation and a faint fear. She wanted to say something, but the guard pulled her towards the exit and the moment was lost. Perhaps it was for the best. What else could be said after such betrayal? Agent Collins came to me, holding out his hand. "Mr. Hart, we are grateful for your help. Your brother really worked with us for the last months, trying to collect evidence against Archer Investments. He wanted to fix everything." I nodded, feeling the tension of the past weeks finally leaving me. Carla stood at the window, hugging herself, and looked at the rain. Her silhouette against the gray London sky seemed fragile and endlessly tired. Approaching her, I said quietly, "Thank you, nothing would have worked out without you." She turned around, and in her eyes I saw something that I couldn't decipher. "What are you going to do now?" For the first time in a long time, I thought about the future. "I don't know, maybe I'll take a long vacation. What about you?" "I don't know either," she smiled weakly. "I'll find a new job, probably. Something related to books, not murders." I felt my lips stretch into a smile, the first real smile in a long time. Sounds like a good plan. 6 months later, I was standing at my brother's grave, placing a white rose on the granite slab. The autumn wind stirred the fallen leaves at our feet, creating quiet, melancholic music. Next to me stood Carla, holding my hand. After a high-profile trial where I testified as the main witness, Zarov, Morgan, and Keitlin received lengthy sentences for organizing a series of murders. Michael's name was cleared. The investigation showed that he was really trying to stop the criminal scheme when he realized what danger threatened me. Michael eventually made the right choice, albeit too late, I said, looking at my brother's name engraved in stone. He loved you in his own way, Carla replied quietly. That's why he decided to stop Zarov when he learned that you were next on the list. I nodded. I finished what he started. Now I can move on. We slowly walked along the cemetery alley. Fallen leaves rustled under our feet, and there was that special autumn freshness in the air that marks not so much an ending as a transformation. In the distance, I noticed Sam, who was waiting for us by the car. Her detective agency was now thriving thanks to the publicity after the Archer Investments case. She waved to us. The divorce from Keitlin was quick and painless, at least from a legal point of view. Emotionally, I still sometimes woke up at night, remembering her words about business and dealing with James. But with each passing day, these memories lost their sharpness, turning into lessons, not wounds. Carla and I started dating 3 months after the trial. At first, we just called each other, discussing news from the newspapers. Then there were rare dinners when I was in New York. Then weekends spent together. And at some point, we both realized that what had started between us in those tense days of preparation for the conference was real. Moving to Boston, Sam asked as we approached the car, or staying in New York? We decided to start with a clean slate, Carla replied. San Francisco, far enough away from the past. Sam nodded. A smart decision. She handed me a folder. Another case, if you're interested. Your military experience and recent infiltration could come in handy. I took the folder but didn't open it. Maybe, I replied, but first I need to sort out my own life. I looked at Carla, and we exchanged understanding smiles. For the first time in a long time, I felt that the future could bring not only pain but also hope. Michael and Keitlin hurt me in a way that may never completely disappear, but they also led me on a path that I otherwise would not have found, a path to myself. I looked again at the cemetery, where among the trees a monument was visible on my brother's grave. Goodbye, Michael. In the end, you did make the right choice, and so did I finally. If you enjoyed this story, please support the author with a like, subscribe to the channel, and share your emotions in the comments. Thank you.